Here. Right. Hey, what's this? Oh, thank you so much. Don't want to say it again.
Let me get my stuff.
Let me go get that thing. Sorry. Hey, shoot. Grab that little, the little thing, it fell. Trash can. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to the, what's this, August Planning Commission meeting for the City of Germantown. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and please call the roll.
Mr. Bacon?
Here.
Mr. Saunders?
Here.
Ms. Hicks? Here. Mr. Marsh?
Here.
Mr. Hernandez?
Here.
Alderman Owens?
Here.
Chairman Harless.
Here, and we do have a quorum for tonight's meeting. We need approval for the June minutes. Are there any additions, subtractions, modifications to the minutes? If not, I'll accept a motion.
So moved. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bacon?
Abstain.
Ms. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. Saunders?
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez?
Yes.
Mr. Marsh?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
Yes.
Chairman Harless.
Yes, and the minutes are approved. Tonight we have one item on the agenda, and I believe Mr. Ross is going to make a presentation for us. Mr. Ross?
Thank you, Chairman Harless, members of the Planning Commission. Tonight's application is for consideration of a revised final subdivision plat for Chapel Cove subdivision as it relates to lots 42 and 43. Chapel Cove, if you remember, is on the east side of town, located in between Germantown Baptist Church and Devonshire Gardens, just north of Poplar Avenue. This area is zoned residential. And this is the original approved plat for Phase 2. Phase 1 is almost fully built out at this point. As part of the original approvals for this subdivision, Planning Commission approved a preliminary and final subdivision plan for 42 lots in 2 phases in July of 2016. In August of 2016, the BZA granted an approval of a variance to allow for a fence to exceed a maximum height of 6 feet along the subdivision's perimeter. One subdivision variance was granted for the length of the street to run longer than the 1,200 feet that was allowed under the subdivision requirements. They have added in administrative approvals for the removal of a street median per the fire marshal request as part of construction plans, a change in the brick, stone, and mortar material for the columns and brick wall at the development entrance, replacement of the wood fencing to change that to brick on the perimeter of Phase 2, and installation of a pedestrian gate and fencing along the western perimeter of the development so that there is access to Johnson Park. In November of 2018, the final subdivision plat for Phase 2 was recorded. In the end of November 2018, the DRC approved a revision to the landscape plan for the subdivision entrance based on the then established HOA desire for more robust landscaping than the developer had originally installed. Now, getting to Lot 43. In February of 2019, Lot 43 received foundation approval to construct a house. At the end of the month, they received an administrative side yard setback variance for 1 foot to allow for a 9-foot side yard setback, as well as approval of their foundation survey. In June of 2019, the BZA was asked to consider a variance request for a further reduced side yard setback on Lot 42 to allow for a chimney encroachment. That request was withdrawn. Lot 42 and Lot 43 have since come together and recognize that based on the way that they are constructed, there is 22 feet 9 inches between the building structures. So that meets the fire department's request for 20 feet in between these structures. So they are asking for, to the Planning Commission, a plat revision for these 2 lots. So on Lot 42, the southern side yard setback would become 6.75 feet, and on Lot 43, the northern side yard setback would become 13.25 feet. They would both still have a 10-foot side yard setback on the north side of Lot 42 and the south side of Lot 43, so they would be in conformance with 23-232-2, which states regarding side yards, there shall be 1 or more required side yard of not less than 10 feet each. So again, the north side of Lot 42 remains 10. Lot 43 has 13.25 on the north side and 10 feet on the south side. This is an example of building separation in Chapel Cove with the 20 feet, so the 2 10-foot side yard setbacks that were plat requirements put in place by the Planning Commission. This is the almost 23 feet, 22 feet 9 inches between Lot 43 and Lot 42 as shown under construction. It became apparent as part of the architectural plans that the architect had drawn the chimney in based on the assumption that Germantown followed the same regulations that were in the Shelby County Unified Development Code that allowed for encroachments into the side yard for chimney features. We do not, so that's where we find ourselves today for this encroachment. The applicant has modified their plans to become in conformance with all of the staff comments that were put forward at the Technical Advisory Committee as well as at the subcommittee in mid-July. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Is there any questions from the commissioners?
Mr. Ross, just for clarity, so the lot lines don't change?
The lot lines do not change, just the southern setback line on Lot 42 and the northern setback line, side yard setback line on Lot 43.
And then the encroachment is, as I see it on that exhibit, in this exhibit, is the chimney, not the primary building face.
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions?
And for clarification, the distance between the chimney on 42 and the building on 43 is the 22.75 or thereabouts?
22 feet, 9 inches, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Ross, have we made other revisions to plats in Germantown?
Your most recent revision was to the Alalon subdivision for some of the interior lots and corner lots for side yard setbacks as part of your plat revision and private street conversion for that subdivision.
Has it been done elsewhere?
23-232-2, having the requirement of one or more side yard allowed for some flexibility in other subdivisions as they were considering their side yards.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Would the applicant like to make a presentation? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in favor of this project? Please come forward. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this project? Please come forward. If you'll state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. Name is Michael Geiger. I reside at 3055 Devonshire Way. Thank you, Chairman. There's a long history for this particular property and this particular application. We were here just a month ago before the BZA, and that process was the appropriate process to follow because the applicants here understood, and as Mr. Ross said, the chimney and the building encroaches into the side setback on lot 42. So instead of going to the BZA, where they should try to secure a variance for a violation of the zoning laws, the applicants instead have come before the Planning Commission ignoring the fact that they have a violation of the zoning laws and ignoring the hearing process that the city mandates and ignoring the notice that is necessary to go out to all the impacted or potentially impacted property owners in Devonshire or in Chapel Cove. And they want to skip that entire process and say simply, we are going to include this variance in our final revised plat. That's the wrong process. The process is to go to the BZA and provide proper notice to all the people in Devonshire Gardens who are entitled to notice and to provide proper notice to all the folks in Chapel Cove who are entitled to appropriate notice that they are actually seeking a variance to the zoning laws. Instead, through the revised final plat, we ignore that process, we skip over a determination from the BZA, and we just go to the finish line. And with a revised final plat, we will have a variance in perpetuity without anyone having the opportunity to stand up and say, I object, or even the opportunity to stand up and say, I support this. The city must honor its own city code and regulations. I direct you to the Planning Commission empowering articles in the city code. Chapter 2, Article 5, Division 2. The powers do not include variance requests. That must be directed to the BZA, and that is in the city code. That's Chapter 23, Article 1, Section 23-1. The authority is vested in the BZA. Article 2 of Section 23-1, the enforcement and the administration is vested in the BZA. There are standards in the particular zoning regulations that the applicants must meet. They tried a month ago, and when they saw their application was about to fail, as you know, Chairman Harless, you were at that meeting and part of the BZA itself, they withdrew that application. They could not secure relief, and now they're trying an end run around it. And nobody has the opportunity to stand up and object. We received a notice saying there's a revised final plat that the applicants want, not that they are seeking to have further erosion of the zoning laws. Remember, Chapel Cove is a subdivision that it's supposed to have 30 residential lots. Instead, there are 42 or 45, I forget the exact number, that are in there. And by having so many lots in there, they're already tighter. I made this argument before the BZA last month. I request that hearing, the transcript from that hearing, be made part of this record, as well as the objections that I submitted dated August 2. And I request this application be denied. It is simply an end run around the established processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Geiger. We are in receipt of your letter, by the way. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this project?
Chairman, may I rebut some of those statements?
Highly unusual, Mr. Chairman.
We are the
Gentlemen. You were given the chance to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak in opposition to this project? Commissioners, any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question of our legal advisor. Gentleman's made certain points of our code and the capability of this body. How do those points stand as far as law is concerned?
Mr. Saunders, I did have the opportunity to review Mr. Geiger's correspondence both to the BZA and to the Planning Commission. Most respectfully disagree. The Board of Zoning Appeals does not appear to have been the appropriate body to consider this application. Their application doesn't meet the definition of a variance. And I think it was the opinion of counsel to the BZA, and it's my opinion that it should not have gone before the Board of Zoning Appeals. It comes back here because the Planning Commission has the authority to approve a subdivision plat, and the Planning Commission, in fact, approved this subdivision plat for Chapel Cove. So this request is to amend the approved subdivision plat, and that approval came from the Planning Commission. So that's why I believe that the appropriate body to consider it is the Planning Commission, since it approved the original subdivision plat.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Any other questions, commissioners?
Just to clarify, so one of the primary concerns in regard to the distances relates to fire code and fire safety, and that's the 20 feet that we typically deal with. Is that correct, Mr. Ross?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. And so in this particular case, we're approving an individual situation with regard to these two lots only on this one property line. And in fact, it exceeds the 20 feet from a safety point of view as far as fire consideration.
From
Right.
principal structure to principal structure, and when you take into consideration the chimney, you have 22 feet 9 inches between the structures. If you measure any other point on the house, you've got 26 feet in between the principal structures.
And it is specific to these two lots only, this one property line, these two setbacks, period, has no effect on any of the other lots
Correct.
in the subdivision. So, okay, thank you.
And it's not the property line, it's just the setback lines. Property lines remain the same.
And Mr. Ross, I know you clarified this earlier, but if you could do it one more time. The ordinance requires at least one or more 10-foot side setbacks. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So both of these lots then would comply with that requirement as proposed tonight.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? If none, do we have a subcommittee report?
Mr. Chairman, the subcommittee met on July 17, 2019, recommended that the application be placed on the next Planning Commission agenda for action
subject to the subcommittee discussion, comments in the staff report, and the plans and documents filed with the application. On July 29th, 2019, the applicant submitted a revised final plat that addressed the comments. The proposed motion tonight is an approval of a revised final subdivision plat, lots 42 and 43, subject to the comments and conditions listed above in the plans and documents submitted with the application.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Bacon?
Mr. Chairman, given the fact that, well, certainly given the advice from council, thank you, Mr. Harris, I think in this instance, the applicant, Inglewood Homes, is, to put it bluntly, sort of lucked out that they've got 22 feet 9 inches between the structures, or at least between the house constructed on 43 and lot 40, and the chimney on lot 42, which in effect exceeds the side yard separation dimension requirement that we originally approved and contemplated with the subdivision application. So, and given the fact that these are the only 2 lots this affects in the subdivision, I'm going to vote to approve.
Mr. Hernandez?
Also voting to approve.
Ms. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. Marsh?
Yes.
Alderman Owens?
I think Mr. Geiger's arguments are compelling. However, based on what we've heard and advice from council tonight and the discussion that was held regarding 23.232.2 and there being required 1 10-foot side yard setback, this does appear to be the appropriate body to hear this request, and as a result, I vote yes.
Mr. Saunders?
Vote yes, based on the comments of my fellow commissioners.
Chairman Harless?
And I vote yes, and the motion is approved. Is there anything else to come before the body? If not, we stand adjourned.